we are tonight going to look at something really peculiar. And so I want to show the map real quick, and then I'm going to get to the slide. And so do you see over here on the left side, it's a map of the New Testament. And if you have your Bibles, go ahead and let's join in, because I'm going to show you a few pictures, but I want to do another one of these journeys in geography. And I'm going to show you some of the pictures from the place today. But what I really want to do is I want us to see how the geography plays into the story once again. And we're in John 4. And so we'll see that unfold in this text. And this is actually the last night we're going to do this, because starting up already, we're going into summer series mode. And so we'll be having different speakers, and we have like a praise night, and Daryl's actually going to speak a couple of times, and I'm going to be speaking, of course, one of them, and we have sign-up sheets, and we're starting a whole summer series thing, and VBS and food every night starting May 31st. We have a meal, all the normal kind of summary things. And so that's all coming up here soon. And so this is the last night we'll do this for a little while. And then, I don't know, we'll do it again, I'm sure, at some point whenever we go somewhere else and take some pictures. And so the next time we have something that's kind of Bible related. And so this is what I'm doing. I'm kind of going on a little geographical journey and how geography plays a part of the actual story. And John 4 should come to your brains pretty quick with Jesus being the Messiah. And so this is fairly early in the John book. And so we need to kind of like go through that. And so I think I'm just going to spend all my time there. I was going to spend a little bit more time in Luke 1 and looking at Mary's song from last week, but let's just stick to one thing. So it's like, let's just stick to the geography of John 4 here. And so, all right, here's what I want us to do. If you look on the left side, you can see the circle, and above the circle there's Ephraim and Jericho, Jerusalem, Jericho. And then if you come way up here, you'll see this whole area called Samaria, right? Which is right here. And if you'll see right there, that's right in the heart of Samaria. And so first century Samaria, which would have been the Romans, of course, named it Samaria, that little area, but it's the Samaritans. And you'll notice that modern day, it's in the West Bank. And so that Sychar is in the West Bank, so Palestinian control, sort of, right, of the West Bank today. So that's important. So we'll get back to that. And so, just like when you go from Jerusalem, you have to go to like Bethlehem. It's in the West Bank, and some of the rest of it is in the West Bank, like going to Jericho, but it's Israeli controlled. Whereas on up there where I'm talking about is very much more Palestinian controlled. And so, but in the first century, of course, that Sychar is where we want to go here. And so let's just read it. Chapter 4, verse 1. When therefore the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and departed again to go to Galilee. And notice verse 4. He had to pass through Samaria. Did he? Did he have to pass through Samaria? No, he really didn't. He didn't need to. He could have gone around it like they had the habit of doing, because that's what the Jews did when they traveled. They would often go around Samaria, because why go to Samaria if you don't have to? And so, but he had to go. Why did he have to go? Because that's the only place he could go to do what he's about to do. Because it's the geography of the day, right? The geography is what made him have to go to this place. And so he couldn't do it any other place. And so this is early in Jesus' ministry, right? And notice back here in chapter 2. Like chapter 2, we get the third day, there's a wedding. And they run out of wine. And Jesus is like, really? Do I have to? And Mary's like, do whatever he says. And he does that thing. And then in verse 13 of chapter 2, the Passover's at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And what does he do there? He drives them out of the temple, right? And so he does this whole thing at the temple. And so, John's trying to introduce Jesus to us, and so far he's reluctant to do anything, chapter 2. Not really a great introduction to the chief priest and other leadership there. They probably were not really impressed with Jesus in chapter 2, were they? And so, as he does all of that stuff. Chapter 3, we get Nicodemus, and he's confused. And actually, the latter part, John 23, chapter 3, verse 23, John the Baptist, his disciples are actually confused. Everybody's confused or upset with Jesus, and we're just now getting to chapter 4. And so John really helps us understand kind of like how this is working. So here's what happens. Jesus is going to leave the sophisticated, right? I mean, of all the people in the world, who would be the most sophisticated religious people in the Roman Empire, right? I mean, these Jews have it. Like by the first century, they really are taking care of the spice and making sure they paid their due amount to the temple, right? So even the cumin, right? So they're kind of fanatical when it comes to some of this stuff. And so Jesus is like leaving the sophisticated Judean area of the Jews, Jerusalem, and he goes to where? A village, Sychar, in the middle of Samaria to go back to home, up north to Capernaum, to Galilee. So you just have to think, 2 Kings 17, what are the Samaritans described as? This isn't just like North Kingdom, South Kingdom. Actually, this region, they're always worshiping idols. It's like they worship God as Jews, but they also kept all the Canaanite idols. And so that's kind of been their little trademark. They've always been idol worshiping, not inferior, of course, to Judaism and the rest of it, right? And so we get our text. So here we go. He had to pass through Samaria. Verse 5, so he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. And there came a woman of Samaria to draw the water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. His disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman therefore said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it was who said to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. What is wrong with the statement Jesus just made? I mean, you're like, how can Jesus make a statement that's wrong? But he didn't make a wrong statement, but what's wrong with this statement? I mean, we all get it, right? I mean, he's living water. He's trying to help her see something very spiritual and not just the water here. What's wrong with this statement? Verse 11. She said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with. The well is deep. How in the world are you going to get this living water business?" Why does she say that? Well, there's lots of reasons, right? We could say that she doesn't understand what? Okay, he jumped from physical to spiritual. She's an unsophisticated Samaritan woman. Yeah, I think all that's true. What else? Why didn't she remember her Old Testament? Because she's a Samaritan. And how many books in the Bible are in the Old Testament to a Samaritan? 5. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And there is no such thing as living water in the first 5 books of the Bible. So remember his audience, right? She's never read Isaiah 12 or Isaiah 53 or any of Ezekiel, right, that talks about living water. So she doesn't expect a future Messiah someday to be, like, she's not going to connect any of that because they only believed in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So first there's this gap of the knowledge, right? So it's like, what in the world is this man saying? We keep going. Jesus said, well, everyone who drinks of this water shall thirst again. So he explains the spiritual concept, right? But if you drink of this living water that I'm going to, right? You'll never thirst, but I shall give him till it becomes a well of water springing up to eternal life. So the woman said, oh, that sounds pretty good. Give me this water. I will not be thirsty, nor come all the way here to draw. He said to her, okay, let's change the subject a little bit. Let me tell you about your husband. She, of course, is uncomfortable. And then she says these statements. Verse 19, the woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. You people say that in Jerusalem it's the place where men ought to worship. And Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem shall you worship the Father. So the geography is a very important part of this, right? And so, let me turn it on. Let's get over there. We have to get through those old pictures. Yeah, this is where we're in Egypt and where they think, Mary and Joseph, and there were all kinds of religious people at that place, right? You go to some of these places and they're everywhere. All kinds of different groups, and anyway, the cave, rummaging through. We talked about this last week. Okay, keep going. Keep Olive Magnificat. That's that was all last week. Elizabeth and Mary, the Temple Mount, the Golden Gate that's been sealed up by the Muslims. And now we get to the next valley. So I know this is a little strange, so I'm going to step back so that you guys can see it. So look at that that picture, and you'll notice a couple of things. There's 2 mountains, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim. And so you'll notice the ruins of a Samaritan temple is on the Mount Gerizim. And the reason this is all really, really important, right? There's 2 peaks. The valley in between is Shechem. So in the Old Testament, it's called Shechem. By the New Testament time, they had renamed it Sychar. But really, this is all Shechem. So the moment I say Shechem is the moment you probably should start thinking the geography has a lot more to do with this than we think. Notice in the left bottom part there, it has a label, Jacob's Well. But what is it? What is it now? Who controls this area? Palestinians. Yeah. It's a mosque. So what happened was the Muslims here in 2000 destroyed a big school that the Jews had there near the well and kind of got rid of some of the trappings of the stuff that was the touristy stuff and built a mosque. Because, that's what they like to do. and so it's like, okay, well, Jacob's well is pretty important. But anyway, so what we need to do is understand the geography of this place. And so that's our lesson tonight. We're going to understand what this Shechem is really all about. And there is still some ruins, and I'm going to show you those, of this ancient city with these two mountains or hills, but kind of like mountains, on each side with the deep valley. And so in this heart of Israel, or Samaria by the 1st century. And so why such like this statement? Let's finish it out. Jesus said to her, so our fathers worshipped in this mountain. Like, what would she have done? She's at the well, right down there. And what did she have to do? She's talking about Mount Gerizim, right there. So all she had to do was go, we worship right there. Like, right there. Just boink, just right there. And you guys all worship over there in Jerusalem. And Jesus says, you worship that which you do not know. We worship that which we know, for salvation is from the Jews. So we're actually worshiping in the right place, and you're not. But an hour is coming, of course, when we will worship in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. So, lots of great sub-things here. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. And so, lots of great things there, right? It's like, what is Jesus trying to tell her? This really powerful statement he's making, right? What is he saying to her? Jesus the mountain. Well, I mean, he's just making a geographical point, first of all, right? It's worship. Jesus is saying, I tell you the truth, it's not here or there or anywhere. It's not, because worship isn't going to be about where you worship, but how you worship and who you worship, right? And so that's why, since it's just us right here, and there's so few of you, that's why I love the irony of this. The irony of John 4, I love it. Every time I get some well-meaning Christian brother or sister who says to me, oh, brother, we need to be careful. You're letting such and such happen in the sanctuary. I always want to go, a little bit of paganism still exists in you. And if you said that to them outright, they would be shocked and offended because they think they're upholding truth. But in reality, they're just like the Samaritans. If you think this somehow makes what we do on a Sunday morning any better than out under a fruit tree, or right, you got a little bit of paganism in you still. But it's okay. We'll put up with you as a brother and sister should. But anyway, little side point. But at some point, I'm getting older, and I'm going to get more offensive. I can already tell in my old age. It's really bad. I should repent in advance. But used to, when a brother or sister said to me, oh, brother, we shouldn't do that, it's the sanctuary, I would say, oh, yeah, and I'd fret. Now I'm just going to say, what are you, a pagan? Like, read some Bible for a change. Anyway, but I digress. Because I've been in the Hindu land where the place was sacred, and I don't think we want to be idol-worshiping people. But worshiping a rock and believing this room is sacred is the same thing. Anyway, back to this. And so, yes? Yes. I think that's the heart of this, right? I mean, that's the whole thing going on here. That Shechem is located in between these two mountains. And so I think that's the heart of it. Okay, I'm gonna do the little picture thing, and then we're gonna go right back to Genesis 12, and we're gonna start this up. So here we go. So this is on Mount Gerizim, to the left over there. You see where it says ruins of a Samaritan temple? There's actually a lot more to it than that. So on the mountaintop, there has been a series of things happen over time, of course. The Samaritans built a temple, a pretty good-sized temple, in the 5th century BC, right? So this whole mount, anything you are seeing would have been originally a part of the temple that the Samaritans built. So it's a pretty good-sized temple. At the same time, they have the second temple in Jerusalem. The Samaritans are building this temple on Mount Gerizim. In 111 BC, the Maccabeans, one of them named John, who becomes a high priest and a warrior guy, he goes to Mount Gerizim and he destroys the temple. He tears down the Samaritan temple. He's a Jew, chief priest, and so they, of course, get strong enough in that time period that they destroy the Samaritan temple. Now, of course, it stays a holy place for the Samaritans, as this woman has said, right? They still worship there. And so by 1st century, it's just in ruins. So she'd have pointed up to a place where they go to worship, but there's just ruins of this former temple up there. 475 AD was a very important year because the Byzantines, the Romans, of course, and the Byzantines, and 475 is the year before Rome was sacked. 476. 475, the year before, a big giant church building was built up there. And so we are looking at a part of the church building. It was, if you're going to make a multi-sided building, how many sides is it going to be in this time period? Everybody remember? If it's multi-sided and it's in the 400s, think about your archaeology here for a second. It's going to be 8-sided, right? Because salvation is 8. And so it was an 8-sided church building that they built on the spot. You can see some of the sides right there. It was pretty good size. I'll zoom in on the inside of it because they had to have a... Remember, I always take pictures of baptisms. I need to get over it, don't I? But anyway, and so they do their thing. Weird stuff. Like in 530 AD, so this is now 55 years after that church building was built, the Samaritans rose up and all throughout the Samaritan land and started killing ministers. So, preachers, they started hounding preachers and killing them and destroying church buildings in that little area of Samaria around 530 AD. The Byzantine Empire didn't like that. And so having the Christian stuff and having these churches all start getting destroyed and ministers everywhere, preachers started getting killed. So they sent in troops and put down the Samaritan revolt. And this church building didn't get destroyed then, but a bunch of other ones did. But that's important because that was kind of the last fleeing of the Samaritans. And then, of course, in that 530s, they built a big castle around the church building. So they had a castle around this place with the church building in the middle. And here's before we go down to Shechem itself. And so they had a castle and a big church building on the former side of the Samaritan temple, which is the former site of all this stuff we're about to read in the Old Testament. So there has been a ton of history here. But in the first century, so a part of this is Jesus is at this place that has all this history of all these different things happening. And of course, mid-7th century, 650s, who else would have come in but, Muslims, of course, came in and destroyed everything up there and put it into ruins like this. And that's the way it's been since. That was in the 650s when they, did that sort of thing. Now we go to Shechem itself. So this is some of the ruins there on the floor of the valley between the two of Shechem. And, it's an old city, right? So this thing's been there for thousands of years. So let's just go back and read about it. So let's go to Genesis 12. And so when we go all the way back, the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country, from your relatives, from your father's house to the land which I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And you and all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with them. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions that they had accumulated, and the persons whom they had acquired, and they set out for the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan, and they passed through the land, and they decided to stop at one place, and the place was Shechem. So when God told Abraham, I want you, Abram and Sarai, I'm going to make you into a great nation, and someday through your seed, Jesus, I'm going to bless all the nations, all families, right? All the nations will be blessed through your... And of course, we know the Hebrew writer is like, okay, this is about Jesus. So when Abram's told that, he said, okay, now go. And where does he stop? In the very heart of Israel. It's at the center of everything. So think back to our map. It's like the center of Israel. And he stops at this place between these two mountains called Shechem. And so it's like, it's kind of like the flag planting, right? It's like going to the moon. Okay, I call this land Israel, and this is going to be ours, according to God. Now, it's going to take 400 years before all that happens, but Abraham basically is like, here we are. And so, kind of makes sense geographically that at the place where God told Abraham to go, that, several thousand years later, more than 2,000 years later, God would say something else at that spot, right? But of course, he builds on all of that. Genesis 35 is a biggie. And so you get... Then God said to Jacob, arise, go to Bethel and live there and make an altar there to God. So Jacob said to his household and to all who are with him, put away the foreign gods which are among you, and purify yourselves and change your garments, and let us arise and go to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I've gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods which they had, and the rings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was near Shechem. So what is this place? Genesis 35. So Genesis 12, it's an announcement. Genesis 35 is what? It's a purification, isn't it? It's like, okay, we need to get rid of the idols, and we need to rededicate to the Lord. Right? Makes sense, doesn't it? See, again, this is the geography that's playing into what Jesus is doing in the text. If we go all the way to the end of Joshua, chapter 24. Right? 24, the people said to Joshua, "We will serve the Lord our God, and we will obey his voice." You're like, yeah, right. No, they had good intentions, some of them, right? So verse 23, Joshua says, "Put away the foreign gods which are in your midst. Incline your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel." And the people said, "We will do it." Then Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made for them a statute and an ordinance. And where did they do this? Shechem. So Shechem becomes much more than just kind of the heart or the center of the Israel nation when it comes to their place, right? What is it really? It's like, there's a bunch of pagans. I want you to go, and this is where I'm declaring that someday I'm going to send someone to this earth who's going to bless all people. And that announcement is made at Shechem. And then later on, they purify themselves at Shechem. And then sometimes Joshua, for example, will stand at Shechem and say, "Okay, you guys need to shape up here and follow the Lord." And then they make a covenant at Shechem. So where else geographically would Jesus need to do this? Right? And then, of course, like Joshua 24, verse 32. What else did they do at Shechem? Somewhere in that valley. And they buried the bones of Joseph, which the sons of Israel brought up from Egypt at Shechem. Out there somewhere, right? And so it's just such good stuff. Let's go back to John because we're out of time. John chapter 4. So, verse 25. The woman then says to him, I'm going to read in between the lines. "I think you're off your rocker just a little bit, dude." So I know that the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he'll make all this known to us. So here's some water and see you later, is what I think she was. I think that's where she was at. I think she was like, okay, you're telling me all kinds of stuff about worshiping here or there and how it's all going to be when, later, but I'll just wait for the man to get here and tell me. And of course, Jesus makes the abrupt, declaration. It's like the moment. Where else would he declare himself the Messiah but at Shechem? It's like geographically the heart of where it should happen. Only God in that moment. Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." And of course, she goes into the city and tells him about the Messiah. But we tend to, which rightfully so, it's not a bad thing to do, we rightfully go to this chapter and say, wow, who did Jesus make his Messiah announcement to? A Samaritan woman who's an outcast at a well. And so we talk about in the middle of nowhere now. I mean, this is definitely in the middle of nowhere, with the ruins of a temple up on the hill. And it's just a little watering hole. And she's there when nobody else is there. And he's like, I'm the Messiah. Here I am. I'm declaring to the world. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, Mark. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Uh-huh. Yeah, yes. Yeah. It really is like that. It's like once, like even now, like once we kind of review the geography, it's like, wouldn't it have really made sense for him to stand up at the temple and say, I'm the Messiah. I'm the one that's been promised to Adam and Abraham, in that faraway place thousands of years ago in a book called Genesis that both of you have read, Samaritans and Jews. It's like, it's almost like that couldn't have been done at the temple. He went to the very heart of where Abraham and Joseph and Jacob and Joshua have been, where it's covenant and it's purification, and they've cleansed themselves. When the distant past, this was a huge cleansing place. And so he's coming on the scene and going, I'm bringing this again. I'm bringing this time of refreshing, like Abraham did, or Joshua, or Jacob, or whoever. And so the geography fits. And if we're not careful, we'll miss it. And it's okay to think about the woman and Jesus doing this with this woman, but she's a vehicle to something else too, to a place. And if we're not careful, we'll miss it. But Jesus had to go there because he's the one that announced to Abraham, hey, I want you to go to this place. Okay, stop right there. And he's the one that, right, through Joshua did this thing, and he's the one that purified them when they gave up their idols. And he's been at this place all along. This is his place, right? It's his place that he does this purification thing at this well. So when he says, I'm living water, it's like he's not doing anything he's not been doing for all of time, right? It's just, what a great place for him to say, this is my title, I'm the Messiah. And so he does that thing. And of course, there's only one way to heaven, right? Through the Messiah. And so he's using a geographical place to show that. It's like, this is the only place you can go. Yeah. Yep. Right. Exactly. What a perfect place to really put a exclamation point on Genesis 12:3, that through what nations? Through all the nations. Jesus is like, I never had this for just the Jews. This was never the intent. The intent all along. Like Genesis 12 supersedes the law, right? That's part of the Hebrew teaching, that the law is within the bigger scope of the promise, which is to all nations. So yeah, it makes sense. It really is. It's like, wow, God really does a really good job of forcing us into these, pivoting us into these places. Like, yeah, if he'd have done it at the temple with the chief priest audience, we'd all say, yeah, Jesus is just like them. He's a big power guy. And so doing it out here and all of that history, that it hasn't stopped. That's why I mention all of that. It's like, it didn't stop with the Samaritans and the Jews, and then the Christians, and then the Muslims. It's just like everybody has a Messiah, and it's Jesus. And And all that continues to play out historically in this little place out in the middle of the West Bank. Anyway, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Yes. Yeah, and you know that, I mean, these people are going to be a part of that early church as they went to Samaria next, right? As the early church spread in Acts. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, just an interesting little, I'm always reminded when you're on the West Bank side, it's like the Palestinian side, it's like you just went back in time. It's so much poorer than Israel, you know, when you go into Bethlehem or wherever.
What about that hole in that building? Oh, battery. What is it about that proves or shows?
So it's a tank of water.
It's what?
It's a tank of water.
Okay.
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, because you do wonder, it's like, you ever wonder what people think? It's like, we should bring in some, like, I should do that more often. You bring in like some 10 and 12-year-olds and that have never been at church. And, you know, they, like, their family starts coming to church, and we just take them one day over up to the baptistry before they ever hear anything, and we just say, what do you think? And see what their reaction would be. Like, why do you have a tank of water in the building? I mean, why would they have a tank of water?
I'm not doubting the word. How do you know that that's what that is?
Because it was a church building. And that's what they did.
Have to have water.
No, it really is. That's the only thing. They have to have. It's the long historical thing of, right? They all practiced baptism for a long time. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years, right? I mean, the very first house churches, they repurposed a room, and what they put in there, a tank of water. And so, you know, like the earliest house churches that have been discovered, there's one in Syria, for example, that I can't get to, of course, that I'd love to go look at, that it's a house church, and they repurposed a bedroom, and, you know, all they had to do was what? They could dig it or they could build it. And so they just basically, they had four walls. They broke out a wall of this bedroom, and then they left a wall about that high, you know, on the front side. And so you're like, why is there like a wall this high and four walls and inside this house that became a church building? I mean, they could have watered the animals with it, but fortunately we have a document that archaeologists really like to look at because it's really helpful sometimes, called the Book of Acts. And it's like, oh yeah, they practiced baptism. So they had to have filled that up. The second, of course, archaeological thing that happens is, for example, that particular house church in Syria, they actually have pictures on the wall. They actually have artwork where they show people getting baptized in their tank in the house of the house church. And so I mentioned it before, most of the catacombs are dated by how the artwork is done of people getting baptized. And so even though people are not, like even these archaeologists, they're not even Christians, a lot of them, right? But that's their primary dating method, is they look at the artwork and go, oh, Byzantine, 500 AD is what we're seeing behind us. And then they know, okay, That's what they practiced, at that time period. But, and, even the location varies, depending upon the time. If we go to that one that I have the pictures of in Jordan, there in the Decapolis area, remember I showed a picture of, it was a former temple to one of the Roman gods. So they didn't carve anything out in the front part of the church building. Instead, they dedicated a couple of rooms that were in the back. It's almost like you come into the foyer, and where the nursery's at was the baptistry rooms, and they had changing rooms on either side and a room, and you could go in and witness the baptism. And so, it's just all based on the time period. That was in the 300s, so it was very early, and they had rededicated a temple to a church building. So they just, for whatever reason, they didn't want to bust out the floor and dig. But they often did that too. But yeah, that early one that I showed in the black rock, that one they dug out. Right there at just kind of like this one. They just dug it out right at the front. This one was built, though, because the Byzantines built it, in that time period. They were able to, make it. You can tell, look at the nice, by the 500s, right? They were able, their craftsmanship of the rock and everything. But, yeah, that's a good question, though. I mean, hey. Well, guys, it's 7:59. Thanks for going on a walk through Israel with me here the last few months. We'll try some other places maybe eventually as we walk through some of these places that we go. I don't remember, did I do Turkey and Greece and Rome? And I don't know, maybe we'll do some of those at some point. Because, we have thousands and thousands of pictures of all of that. And I'll show you lots more baptistries. All right, guys, thanks. Have a great week.